Hey, Dr. Von Duke here. Welcome to Quick and Dirty Rubric number 5, which is on task 1. It's the question 5, and this is for the special education at TPA, which is my specialty on this channel. So how does, what is the guiding question rather for rubric 5? This mic wants to keep traveling places. All right. How will your assessments provide evidence of your focused learner's progress towards your learning goal? That is the whole point of this one. And it's planning for that to happen. It's not proving that it's happened yet. So how does rubric 5 relate to other rubrics? Well, first of all, in rubric 1, you were asked to provide measurable objectives for each lesson objective. So that's going to form the basis. That measurable objective is going to form the basis for hopefully how you've already made your assessment. Next, in rubric 11, you're going to be asked to analyze and describe your students' progress through the assessments. And obviously what you've planned and measured here is going to apply there. And then here, you're also going to draw on rubric 2, where you looked at the strengths and needs of the focused learner related to the baseline for discussing how you supported and challenged the student through the use of your assessments here on this rubric 5. All right. Quick commercial. I'm Dr. Von Duke. I'm a professor of education. I'm a certified EdTPA portfolio reviewer. Been doing this for a while now. I have this channel as a service to the public for teacher candidates because I know that I teach teacher candidates. I know how busy and difficult it is, and I believe that your focus should be on your students and not necessarily on all the ambiguities and anxiousness that comes around this portfolio that's tied to your potentially tied to your future paycheck, as well as opportunity to get a job. So I want to lessen some of that anxiety. Should you find this quick and dirty lesson is not enough, you can find other services I offer on Linktree, which I'll mention at the end possibly. All right, for rubric 5, again, getting a level 1 is sort of a no-brainer. You almost put anything down and you get a level 1. So if you have very loose alignment between your assessments and your learning goals, done. At a level 2, your assessments are loosely aligned to the learning objectives, and there's a vague idea of how you're measuring it, or you're not including all the lesson objectives. But note, if you include both of these things, like you don't include all your lesson objectives and your assessments are very loosely aligned with your learning objectives, and it's very vague about how they're going to be measured, that's going to drop you down to a 1. That's going to be considered very loose alignment. Let me give you an example of a level 2. Say that somebody has the same assessment plan for all their lessons. Don't go through 5, say 1 through 3. But if the assessment is the same, you can't tell if the focused learner is learning better, making more progress, or they've just become very familiar with your assessment. And they've just gotten good at knowing what answer goes there, for instance. So if you were to use the same assessment, you would have to have a very good explanation for why using that same assessment would provide evidence of the learner's progress at different points in your overall lesson plan, and not have this familiarity issue come up. Another one that I've seen is that students will use a standardized source as their assessment, but the standardized source, say it's a reading test, right? It's maybe only very loosely aligned with their actual lesson objectives and the lesson assignments that they have. So it's not really measuring the focused learner's progress in your lessons. It might show something on the standardized assessment that they're doing better, but that very general larger piece doesn't accurately tell you how your particular lessons are working. So those are 2 cases where you might feel like you're giving a good assessment, but you're actually not going to get a good score. For a level 3, you are going to have measurable, you're going to have assessments that measurably measure how well the students get to the lesson objectives. And you explain how it's clear that the assessments measure that progress towards that lesson objective. So how you scored assessment 1 measure lesson objective 1? And then how did you score lesson 2? What was the measure that you used? And how did that show a difference between what was required in lesson objective 1 and then to lesson objective 2? To get to that level 4, you have to show all of the lesson objectives and that your assessments align with them and measure the thing that they're supposed to be measuring. But you're also going to show that your assessment has been modified in some way for your focused learner to provide appropriate levels of challenge and support in light of their specific needs and strengths. So how are you going to do that? Well, first of all, you're going to show that you have a strength or need through the baseline. That's your first point of evidence to say, when the student took the baseline, they already had a strength in this. So I modified this assessment. I upped the challenge by, I don't know, making larger numbers, all right, to increase the challenge. Whether you did or didn't, again, doesn't matter. This is not a record of what you did. It's a record of, do you know what to do to create a good lesson plan and assess and measure how your lesson worked out according to how EdCPAC is teaching. So how about if your student has an extra challenge in certain areas, they have a need on the baseline, they didn't get some sub skills, or they were very poor on one part of your baseline assessment, which would be like your summative assessment. What did you do to modify the assessment that you would have given for, say, the lesson one objective to better support the student? Maybe you provided a graphic organizer, maybe you changed the numbers so they were easier, maybe you lowered the challenge a little bit. So how did you do that? Another thing you can do is also you can point to evidence, not just on the baseline assessment. Well, it would have to be on the baseline assessment because at this point in the EdCPA, you wouldn't have taken the other assessments. That's something that could come down the road. But it's funny how they ask you to just upload the baseline assessment for task one, but you really want it filled in before you finalize your lesson plans and before you would be writing on your commentary, so you know where your student is. And then the level 5 is monitoring the student's own progress. And there's some suggestions on that on the quick and dirty for rubric 4. So just remember that you want to go gather your documents. So get their completed baseline, get a copy of all of your assessments, whether they're formative like exit tickets or observations that you're going to make, or summative. And then look at what the lesson objective is for each of those assessments. And you should have covered all 3 or more of your lessons. Stick to 3. And then talk about how that gets measured. And that is it for now. And I hope to see you in the next task sequence.